Yet you ended up in government college in Tirunelveli. But you did regard that the experience of this college life ended up giving you the entrepreneurial drive. How critical is it that our existing journey would influence our startups later?
So first of all, Johnson, let me repeat, it's a pleasure being here and very happy to see so many people, especially students, logging on to the session. So to answer your question, how important it is, I could not go to BITS Pilani because we came from a lower middle class family. And my dad said, look, it's a great college, but I can't afford it. And, getting loans, educational loans, in those days was very different from getting it today. And therefore, he said, look, I can't afford it. So I just waited at home and hoped to get an admission into a government college, which is obviously significantly cheaper. And that's what happened. Now, it so happened that this college that I got admission to was also the latest college opened by the state. And hence, it was the first batch and there was nobody there. So when we went there, we realized that they didn't actually have a college. They gave us an address, and the address was actually the address of the Tirunelveli Medical College, the government medical college in Tirunelveli. And we landed up at a medical college. And then they said, look, the engineering college here is not yet open. The campus is being built. So meanwhile, we will give you a small shed. It was a shed outside the dispensary in the medical college. And we had engineering classes inside the medical college campus. Now, the experience taught me is that it's exactly how startups operate. Much later, I realized exactly how startups operate. There's no structure in place. There's no infrastructure in place. There's no support system in place. Everything is bootstrapped. And then you build things as you go along. And I saw that happening in my eyes, right in front of my eyes in that college. And interestingly, later, my first two jobs, I worked in the Murugappa group. I joined a company which was it was a large group, but I joined a company where I was the employee number 7. Then few years later, I quit and joined Wipro. And Wipro now, of course, $1 billion conglomerate, but at that time was less than 50 crores turnover. It was around 42 crores. And there was only one big office in Bangalore on MG Road, unlike today where it is all over the place. So each of those experiences helped me when we did our own startup as to how to be frugal, how not to worry about having support system and yet be able to build it up slowly. So in a sense, I would say I'm quite lucky. If I'd gone to BITS Pilani with all those support systems in place, maybe I wouldn't have understood a startup or understood it very differently.
I think that's a very critical point you're trying to make here, sir. Most of us, we try to blame what is there and what is not there. And most often, students, especially when we are studying in college, we say that this infrastructure is not provided. We compare other colleges and say, I think that's very crucial. When we don't have things, that's exactly when we get to create things and we try to go beyond our comfort zone to start building things up. This brings me to one of our conversation I used to have with Anant Ravi sir. So, sir, you often keep insisting us to focus our pedagogies or efforts to help students think. And your experience of IISc compelled you to think as opposed to the traditional system of education, which focuses on structured learning. A little more insights on that, where you often keep telling about thinking, as opposed to only studying. Because there are a lot of students here who wish to understand why we took an approach where we enforce this concept of thinking.
Okay. I just would like to say that why I emphasize the concept of thinking, Johnson, was I studied in an engineering college somewhere in Chandigarh, and one of the best colleges, whatever I would say. But the study in engineering college was more in terms of trying to see what was given in the books, and it was nothing beyond it. And whatever I learned was basically taught to me by my professors, and I thought that was the end of it. And there exactly and possibly I got some good marks also, and I thought I have already arrived. I am a big man. I have got some good CGPAs in my college and I am done. But the reality happened is that during my 4th year of engineering, we had this department of, I was in chemical engineering department. We have an institute called Association of Chemical Engineers. And one of the sessions of Association of Chemical Engineers was held in Chandigarh for that year 1978. And we had some professors from Indian Institute of Science who had come there to take some classes for the entire association. That's where I understood that possibly there is something which we don't know, which is being taught by people from Indian Institute of Science. And I made an attempt to get into Institute of Science. Fortunately, I got admission. But then when I went to that Indian Institute of Science, and the first class which I attended by one professor, Mr. VMH Govindrao, he actually gave us a project. This was in the process design business to make online idlis. Now, I could go and search anywhere in the books. There was nothing in the books to tell me how to make online idlis. And then I was given a project to say that why not I start from finding out the basics of how to go about it. And this was not available in any book. This was not a problem at that point of time to think also that can online idlis be made. So this was the first project which was given to me, wherein this concept of I had to think on my own how to reach that. And today possibly ID Idli is something close to what we happened. This was taught to me by somewhere in 1978. And the best part is, like, you talk about open book exams. I was given an open book exam by Institute of Science somewhere in 78. Frankly, believe me, we had taken all the books along with us, but I could not open the book because no answers were in the book. I had to think and write. So that was the first time I understood that getting a book with you is of no use. You have to start the concept of thinking. The problems were totally different. So the concept of think came rather than mug and write. So this is where, Johnson, my beginning of thinking started, from an institution of that stature.
I think, Vaiti sir, here we have a very specific question where we are emphasizing our discussion on starting up. I'm trying to broaden this topic to starting up a company, to starting up my own career, to following my passion. You have specifically mentioned in this book that you don't believe in just ideas. Rather, you want to focus more on solving a problem. Even if I'm pursuing a career, I would want to focus on a bigger picture, bigger purpose, a bigger meaning. So when you started this journey of endeavoring this e-commerce business, just by looking at one ad that popped up during your Wipro days, could you give us a little more gist about how you went on from this exciting idea to solving that problem, and what you would advise somebody who is aspiring to start their own business to do?
So let me, Johnson, answer this in two parts. First, let me tell you how we started up. So just to repeat the incidents you mentioned, I was working on a project and browsing online when I came across, this was I think in 96 or 97, and there was an ad that I came across which said buy books online. I clicked on it and landed up on this website called Amazon.com. And today it's a household name, but 96, 97, Amazon.com itself was just 2 years old. I had never heard of the company. And when I landed there, I suddenly realized here is a website that is selling books to me. And I was very curious. I spent a lot of time browsing through it and realized that if I'm sitting in India and I order something, they will ship it to me. So I was very fascinated. I ordered more for fascination. I just said, let me see what happens. So I didn't order any specific book. I just searched for the cheapest book that was available. I was not even interested in reading it. I was more curious to see if somebody would ship it to me. So, and because I didn't know who they were, I just ordered that book and then paid through a credit card and promptly forgot all about it. 3 weeks later, so just imagine how much the world has changed. 3 weeks later, I got cover by post, which I opened and realized the book was there. And then I said, wow. The experience itself was so good that I went on some website I'd never heard. I selected a book, I gave my address, I paid, and the book got delivered home to me after 3 weeks. And I was so excited. Later, when we got a chance to set up FabMart, which was the first company we set up, and Ravi knows those early days because he was instrumental in helping us get off the ground with a lot of support and resources in those days. He was in a sense, one of our founding members. We were 6 of us as co-founders, but he was part of the group that helped us start. So we learned from each of us had our own experiences, and we learned, and we didn't know how to go about it. So it was truly pioneering work that we did, every single aspect.
Just a minute, I'm sorry, just interrupting you. Maybe I think it would not be complete until you give your experience of how was the interaction with Mr. Mukesh Ambani in 1999, when the startup concept was still at a very nascent stage.
Sure.
I would like you to please elaborate a little, because he is an idol for possibly all the startups in the country, at least. I would not say world, but in the country. So
sure.
You have to give, how was your interaction with him when you went with the proposal?
Sure. I'll also narrate that interesting incident that happened.
Yes, please. Yeah, I think you should do that, because that will be doing justice to your coming year.
Yeah, sure. So, we picked up from that and set up the entire experience of FabMart. And I'll answer the part about the problem separately. Let me now stress on the other part. So we had the idea and we knew we are going to execute this, but we obviously needed money. And, unlike in today's startup world where the biggest announcement that a startup makes is about fundraise, right? It's not about the product that they launch or the service or the money that they make. Actually, nobody makes money. But even if they make money, there's no announcement. The only announcement they have is how much money they raised. But in those days, we didn't know we were doing a startup. The word startup was not there. None of the 6 of co-founders knew the word was called startup. All we knew is we had to get some money. And Sudhakar, who was one of our co-founding team, somebody who he knew in Reliance, he reached out and then he got a message back saying, Reliance may be interested in investing and helping you get off the ground. Would you be interested in talking to us? So we said, fine. So 2 out of the 6, I was not part of the 2. So 2 out of 6, which is Sudhakar and Sandeep, I think only 2 of them went.
Yeah.
And the reason 6 of us didn't go is because we didn't have money for 6 air tickets. Only 2 of us could go. So 2 of us went. And they went and the meeting was very interesting. I think they landed up in Bombay. Meeting was with a gentleman called Mr. Manoj Modi, who's a very senior member of the Reliance group. And the meeting was supposed to start at a certain time, but obviously we were waiting. Finally, when the meeting started, Mr. Manoj Modi came in and said, please wait. Mr. Mukesh Ambani is wanting to join the meeting. And, both Sudhakar and Sandeep were shocked because they didn't expect Mr. Ambani himself to come and join the meeting. Thought it'll be a meeting with somebody else. So they waited. And a few minutes later, Mr. Ambani himself walked into the conference room and said, start. And like most things in technology, the moment that happened, and Sudhakar had put together a very nice plan and he had put some slides and all, and he connected and the laptop failed. And it didn't work. And obviously, Mr. Ambani doesn't have time for people to repair laptops. So he took about a few minutes, he was fiddling. And then finally, Mr. Ambani obviously got impatient and said, you forget all this. If you know what you're doing, you don't need a laptop. Sudhakar said, fine. So no laptop, whatever was there, he just spoke for about 20 minutes. And he continued speaking. Then he got up, Mr. Ambani got up and said, okay, I have to leave. I have a meeting, and everybody left. So obviously these people felt that the meeting didn't go well. And the laptop also failed. So crucial points may have been missed. But anyway, we got a chance and we blew the chance. But it happened. So then they packed the laptop and then they went and stood near the lift. It was in Nariman Point, the office. And in those days, Nariman Point lifts it to come up and down, it takes 10 minutes. So they're waiting for a long time for the lift to come. Before the lift came, one gentleman came out and he came to Sudhakar and said, in whose name should I give the check? And he said, what check? He said, no, Mr. MDA, Mukesh Ambani was called MDA. He said, he's asked us to give you 5 crore rupees. And they were both shocked. And they said, oh, 5 crore rupees. Then Sudhakar said, we haven't even formed the company yet. And he said, okay, so shall I give 5 crores in your name? He said, no, don't give 5 crores in my name. And then they came back, and the next 7 days we ran helter and skelter, locating a chartered accountant to register a company and open a bank account.
YTI started the company. YTI started the company.
So that's where I think Ravi was helpful. We had to take his help because he was the senior member of the team, and then we got connected to him and he said, don't worry. And then we took his help and registered the company, opened a bank account. I think it was in Citibank or something.
Yeah,
Citibank opened an account all through Ravi's help. And then the money came in. These are great incidents that you look back today with great fondness. It also shows the caliber of this person who spends 20 minutes talking to people, meeting people. Actually, he never spoke. He just kept quiet. He's never met and then casually writes a 5 crore check because he believes that here is an idea and here is a group of people worth backing. I think it's great learning in terms of ability to identify opportunities and ability to identify great teams to work with. And that's a skill that any entrepreneur to have, especially the second part. The money is the less important, but an ability for an entrepreneur to be able to hire great people or back great people and talent is the essence of entrepreneurial success. The reason why it's so large today is because of the ability to hire great talent. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Ravi.
No, one thing I think you should also, I think this was point number 1. But I think you'll also have to stress that giving money was not only an issue, but he sat through appraisals. So yes. I think you should mention that for a person of his stature who is putting 10,000, 20,000 crore project, in 99, he used to sit for hours together in the appraisal. So this is something you should
In fact, he used to not only follow appraisals. I remember after 6 months after we launched, he called us for an appraisal discussion. That's what he's mentioning. And we all 6 of us this time went. We gave him a full update on where we were. And he was so interested in the micro details. What is the customer buy? At the time, we were selling only music cassettes. The price of each cassette was 30 rupees.
Yes.
Right. This is the Reliance Group. And he was fascinated by how many cassettes people were buying at 30 rupees. And people were buying maximum 2 cassettes because the very, very early days, it was early 2000. Nobody knew about e-commerce, which means the biggest order that a customer will place would be about 90 rupees if he buys 3 cassettes. And he was so fascinated to understand the behavior. So it wasn't about the amount, it was understanding that. I'll also tell you, now that Ravi has mentioned, I'm going to give an additional insight. 2 months after that, I remember he came to Bangalore for some work, and Ravi and he, and I think Mr. Modi, but I'm not sure, but both Ravi and Mr. Ambani were both there, and they were busy with some other work. Evening around 4 o'clock, I think we got a call from Ravi saying, we are coming to your office and Mr. MDA is coming. And we were shocked, saying, why is he coming? No, he wants to get an update and review. And we are like, we are not prepared for it. He said, it doesn't matter, we are on our way, we are there in 20 minutes. And in 20 minutes, he came. We had a small office, which was just a house. And again, we are talking of Mr. Ambani, who runs the Reliance Group. He comes in and again spends 2 hours in that room, understanding every single thing that's going around. Who are these people? Who are the people have you hired? What is their background? How much are you selling? How much are you buying? What is the margin you make on a cassette? None of this is information that you would expect him to ask for at his level or stature. But so much of involvement, and it's not again like Ravi is saying, it isn't that the amount that he invested made any difference. The total amount they invested was 5 crores, right? It just doesn't matter to them. A 20,000 crore group at those days really doesn't matter about 5 crores. But it was the trying to understand the insight of consumer behavior. Talking to people in a smallest investment that he made really shows that why they have moved from where they are to where they are today.
I think one of the most important qualities that we as youth need to imbibe is the art of listening. It is always said that the moment I speak, I'm only knowing what I already know. But when I listen, I get to know a lot more things. Yeah. So I think we did want to take a little more insights on your approach to solving a problem, because most of the students whom we have here are a part of something called as Change Makers Club. These guys are anywhere from first year to third year. And the objective that they have all come together is to find problems that they can solve using technology. It's not the intention of building an enterprise at the end of the fourth year, but it is the understanding how to solve problems that they can truly impact or bring a difference. So your insights on approaching a problem or solving the problem.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a very important question that you're asking, Johnson. Probably the essence of entrepreneurship. And I'm very happy you asked this question. The reason, and you mentioned this earlier, I stressed in my book that an idea is not important. And again, I must tell you that all of this information or wisdom or whatever you call it that I'm sharing today is not that I was smartly knew about this 20 years back. The reality is I didn't know any of it. All of this is what I've picked up over a 20-year journey as an entrepreneur. I'm sharing this with you. So please don't think that I knew all of this very smartly when I started. I actually didn't know any of it, and which is why I'm trying to share. So the first thing about this problem is, anybody who wants to start an enterprise or a company or want to do anything, typically say we have a great idea. I see many entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs, young students who come to me and say, I have this great idea. And to be honest, some of those ideas are really great. And they say, we want to start a company, and I discourage them. I tell them, if you have an idea, you're wasting time. You're wasting time, you're wasting money, you're wasting everybody's time. Instead, try and solve a problem. Now, when I say problem, here's what I mean. If you have an idea, remember that everybody has an idea. If you ask in this group of say 50, 55 people who are there, each of us will be able to give you 5 ideas. That's 250 ideas. But how many of them actually can go on to become a product or a service or a company depends on whether the idea solves a problem. So let me explain. If you have an idea, nobody pays for an idea because the idea is of no value. What you must do is, am I solving a problem? That's question number one. You should ask yourself, am I solving a problem? Second, am I solving a problem that is an existing problem, or am I giving a solution to a totally new problem? Now, that's the second part. The reason I'm saying it, if you're solving a problem for something that's never been done before, then you approach it differently. But if you're solving an existing problem, it means there are already existing solutions in the market. Because the problem has been existing, somebody would have tried to solve the solution. In which case, you must find out, is my solution better than existing solution? And the way to compare your solution is on 3 different parameters. And again, I mentioned it in the book. You must find out if my solution is better, faster, or cheaper. And it's very important that you keep these 3 words in mind, because any company that you take in the world, the smallest startup, today on the other hand, the largest conglomerate, like say the Reliance Group, any company in between, all companies do only 3 things. They make a product or a service, and they try and make their product or service better, faster, cheaper. It doesn't matter, right? A small startup to the large Reliance Group, this is what they do: better, faster, cheaper. And the reason is, if there is an existing solution in the market, if your solution is better, then you have an opportunity. If your solution is better and faster, then I think you have a better opportunity. If your solution is better, faster, and cheaper at the same time, then I think you truly have an opportunity to set up a large, successful company. And the reason I'm saying this is, it's very important when you launch, think about these 3 words, and I can assure you it's very difficult to get all 3 at the same time. The reason is, exactly like you, somebody else who's a competitor is also doing the same thing, right? So you want to make your product better, faster, cheaper. Your competitor is also trying to make their product better, faster, and cheaper. There's a third company in the market who are also trying to do the same thing. All 3 companies can't have the same product which is better, faster, and cheaper, right? And that's what you call competitive activity, right? Competition is all about it. The essence of competition is to make your product or service better, faster, cheaper. You must always try and see on any 2 of the 3, I'm always ahead of competition. If you're ahead on 2 out of 3, you have a good chance. If you're 1 out of 3, you're vulnerable. If you're ahead on all 3, then I think you're going to do very well, but it's very, very tough to do it. Okay, so that's the second part. Now, the third question about the problem is, I told you, are you solving a problem? B, are you solving an existing problem? In which case, find out if your solution is better, faster, cheaper. The third is, are you solving a problem for a reasonably large number of customers? Now, these customers, if it's a corporate B2B business, then you may have anywhere between 500 to 50,000 customers. If you're a large B2C product, then you're talking of millions of people. But it doesn't matter. The question is, do you have a reasonably large set of customers? And the fourth question is, are those customers willing to pay you for your solution? And the last question you will ask is, are they willing to pay for my solution again and again? Which means, are you going to have repeat customers? Answer these 5 questions, and I think you're ready to do a startup. If you don't get the answer to all these 5 questions, you are not ready to do a question. I'm going to summarize this for easily. A, if you have an idea, it's a waste of time. Find out, are you solving a problem? B, are you solving an existing problem? Are you solving a new problem? If it's an existing problem, find out if your solution is better, faster, cheaper. Third is, are you solving this for a reasonably large number of customers? Fourth, are these customers willing to pay you for your solution? Because there's no point building a solution that is given away for free. And the last is, are these customers willing to buy your solution a second time and a third time, which means, will you have repeat? If you get answers to all these 5, you're ready to launch. If you're not getting answers to all the 5, you're not ready to launch. That's it. It's the essence of startups.
I think this is very, very valuable. And this is something that we would not get in any MBA classes, especially because it's coming from experience. I think there's one more question in between when we are asking those 5 questions, is that whether the customer knows that there is a problem. And when you started your e-commerce journey, one of the things that you have written it exorbitantly in the book is that customers didn't know about e-commerce. And as you quoted Richard Branson saying, if you are given an opportunity which at that point of time you would not know to do it, just say yes and then start learning how to do it later. I think in this era where we have so many opportunities, so many options, this fear of missing out is quite common in students, and they want to grab on the first thing that comes their way. How do you suggest us to take steps progressing to build something that we are not yet capable of, but we are certain of building that capabilities while we progress in that quest of solving the problems?
Okay, I think this also another important question, and again I'll tell you another essence of a startup when you're building a product or a service. It doesn't matter. In an ideal world, you want to launch a great product or a service. Companies try and do that, but startups, if you're trying to launch a perfect product or a perfect service, I can tell you that you're likely to fail. However, you will give yourself the best chance of success if you launch what is called an imperfect product or a service. I know this goes against conventional wisdom, but I'll tell you why. Startups, when you launch, you execute for speed. You don't execute for cost. As you go along, you'll execute for cost, then you execute for efficiency. A great product or a service essentially has great features, is available at the lowest cost, and does great and is executed efficiently, which is the also what I mentioned earlier, which is better, faster, cheaper. Now, as a startup, if you want to make a product which is superior on all grounds, costs the lowest, and is efficiently executed through a great supply chain, you will never launch. And hence, the most important thing for you, which is where your FOMO comes out, is that if you think there is an opportunity in a market, if you think you have a solution that addresses a large number of potentially paying customers, you must create what is called a minimum viable product, which is the MVP. That's what people talk about. What it essentially means is it a product or a service that will stand basic scrutiny? So when we go back to, say, the e-commerce site that we launched in FabMart, and Ravi was with us in those days, it was very different from the website that we had to create, let's say, 2 years later. Totally different. At that time, all we said is, can somebody add one music cassette? I'm serious, I'm not joking. In our first version, a customer could add only one music cassette. If you wanted to buy two numbers or two different cassettes, you have to place a second order. Does it sound silly? It sounds stupid, right? I mean, nobody would make a product for a customer to add only one, right? But two things. Now, when we launched, we said, look, don't you think customers will buy two numbers, three numbers of a cassette? Don't you think they'll buy 3-4 cassettes? Yes, they will. But we said it doesn't matter. Just get it out in the market. So we launched it, and 2 weeks later, we put an update where customers were allowed to change the quantity. And 4 weeks later, we put an update where customers could add an additional cassette onto the cart. Now, does it mean we could have waited for another 4 weeks? Yes, you can. So there's no hard and fast rule. But the reality is, at some stage, if we said if a customer can add a cassette, go online, pay for it, enter his address or her address, that's all we need, right? We need who's the customer, what is the address, what is the phone number, what is the product. Then as we went along, we kept on making change. In fact, in the first 3 months, we probably changed the product maybe 8-10 times. So much rapid changes happened. But if you had not made the first launch, we would have made no change. Because you're always very happy. See, entrepreneurs are also very happy when you're sitting in a room, designing a product mentally, saying, oh, I'll do this, take a blackboard, put features and keep writing. Moving it from the blackboard into the market is a huge challenge. So we are all in our comfort zone, adding features on the blackboard. What is difficult is to take the product and put it out in the market. So therefore, I think if you have a minimum viable product, get it out. If you're waiting for the perfect product, you're not launching. I think you should launch an imperfect product and give yourself a chance of success, then wait for a perfect product. It goes against conventional wisdom, but I think it is very important.
I think that wisdom is today widely accepted, maybe in terms of the agile processes that have been laid out, or the DevOps process that are celebrated today, or this fail fast, fail early concept of the Silicon Valley. I think what you have done previously during your own journey is something that is now, I think it's not anymore unconventional. Rather, it's, as mentioned, to focus on progress rather than perfection. I think that's something that all of us should really understand, especially when we are building products. As engineers, we love to build product that does not have bugs, but I think that's never going to happen. This is something that I really wanted to ask on behalf of my students, that most of us are scared to start as we think of consequences ahead of time itself, and have heard of so many success failure stories. Questioning our ability is a good approach to always stay humble. But how do we prevent this doubt from stopping us from pursuing what we truly love?
You should never allow doubts to creep in. I think doubt is a problem. If you are doubtful about success, then you're not giving yourself. See, fear is a problem, right? So therefore, if you're going to be doubtful of whether I succeed or not, the way to write this down if you look at my experience, is that success is measured on different metrics. People say, I've succeeded because I managed to sell my company for several $1 million. I've succeeded because I made so much of money. Or you can say, I succeeded because I tried doing something that I was passionate about, and it doesn't matter what the outcome is. So I think you have to define yourself what the metrics of success is. And once you define, it's fairly clear. If your metric is that after I become an entrepreneur, I want to make 100 crores of rupees in my bank account, then you'll have to keep working till you reach there. And you may reach there, you may not reach there. But what happens then is that your success then gets defined by a metric that may or may not be important. It's important to you, but you'll constantly keep falling behind that metric. Whereas if you say, my objective is to see, I'm passionate about this problem, I'm going to solve this, whether I make money or not is a secondary issue, then I think you're giving yourself a very different metric of success. And I'm not saying this is important or that isn't important. I'm not saying making 100 crores is bad. I'm not saying anything. All I'm saying is define metrics for yourself. Once you make metrics for yourself, then you go chase it. But as an entrepreneur, the only thing that I would advise you is, irrespective of what your metrics are, remember one thing: ultimate success or failure of your company is not dependent on you. You may think that as an entrepreneur, I'm the most important thing, I'm going to influence success. The reality is you're not. The reality is you're going to think of a concept or an idea, and you're going to get along with a group of people and try and get the product out. But the success or failure of that depends on your team members, your company, your other employees, environmental factors, regulatory issues, the market, the customers, competition. Some of it are in your control, some of it are not in your control. So therefore, you can't say, I'm going to launch this company, create a great product, it will be the perfect product, it will be better, faster, cheaper, it will beat everybody in the market. I will make sure all regulatory issues fall in thing. I will raise money at the right time. I will beat all competition. All my customer service will be fine. Nobody knows all those things, right? Therefore, focus on doing what you can, which is to get a product out and do your best. So under the circumstances, I have 7 things that I've listed down as experience. 7 things that you must bring to the table as an entrepreneur. None of it are related to a product or a service or an idea. These 7 things are mind, body, heart, soul, blood, sweat, tears. These are the 7 things that you bring. As an entrepreneur, these are your toolkit. Right? I'm going to repeat this: mind, body, heart, soul, blood, sweat, tears. If you can bring all these 7 to the table and make sure that you invest all of them, spend all of them every day at work, then don't worry whether your company succeeds or fails, right? You can only do your best. It's like going and playing a game of cricket. You can bowl well, you can bat well, you can field well, but you can't win the toss, right? You may win the toss, you may not win the toss. It's not in your control. You can't control how the other team plays. Every day when you come back, you must say, I invested my blood, sweat, tears. I gave my mind, body, heart, soul. It's like saying, when the game was going on, I batted to the best of my ability. I bowled to the best of my ability. I fielded to the best of my ability. Does it mean that you will win every game? No, it doesn't mean, right? It means that you may still lose the game because it depends on the toss, it depends on the pitch, it depends on how the other company and the team is playing. So make sure that you put in your best. And that's why I've given you a toolkit. Use the toolkit. You may succeed, you may not succeed, but you'll give yourself a great chance of succeed. But if you don't use those tools, you will fail. That's all I can guarantee you. If you don't use them, you will fail. If you use them, you may succeed, you may not succeed. But that's how high risk an entrepreneur's job is.
I think the satisfaction of having given the best is what will
absolutely
keep us going. Perhaps when we are starting new next time, I think we will always have that in mind, that I have given my best even during the previous time. For students who are...
just a minute, I just wanted to say, I'm just taking up from where Vaiti has left. I think what all he said, possibly I have faced it for 25 years, sitting with the most accomplished entrepreneur in this country. But let me tell you, he has all the fears of failure. It is not that he doesn't have fear of failure. His fear of failure is extremely high, and he doesn't want to take a chance of failure. So this is what one thing. So when we were good in petroleum, but we never knew what is telecom. And although we launched our Reliance Communications somewhere in 2002, but to the information of all the participants here, we started the work in 93. We started the work in 93. Our implementation started only in 2000. So 93 to 2007 years, we have just spent time to even understand, like possibly what is the cost of the service we can give, what is the technology we can give, acceptability of the product. Our not being a person, we were always bulk people. We were handling material in bulk. We never knew how to handle a customer, an individual customer. So in fact, FabMart was one of the reasons for us to understand the customer psyche. So we just wanted to invest in some of these companies to understand exactly how to handle an individual customer. So we have invested, and that experience, whatever we spent in 2 years in terms of understanding e-commerce before we launched our communication business, was 200 crores. 200 crores was the money which was spent to understand the e-commerce business. So the amount of work which has gone, and ultimately we were trying to get into a new business and totally not understanding what telecom is all about other than using the phone. But the amount of work which has gone was very heavy. And practically, you are talking about bootstrapping now. I will tell you, the bootstrapping happened for us in 2000 when we went to the banks with all the support. We did not want any equity. We said, okay, let's go through debt equity. So when we went to the banks to say that, okay, now we will start the project, we want some X amount of money for debt. Will you believe me? This is for the benefit of all of them. The person who was heading a bank, he called me. He took my appraisal note and threw it out of the door. He says, get out. He says, you people don't even know what is telecom and you are trying to teach me telecom. Get out. So that was a concept wherein we say that we had bootstrapped. We used our own resources. Today, I'm sure that we talk about bootstrapping. We even see the magnitude of the amount may vary. But the issue is that he had his own problems to get that money. But we used all our money without using a single rupee from outside and making it happen. So whether it was regulatory, whether it was technology, whether it was the customer, all of these were thought of even putting the first money. I think Vaidya did not tell you that although that 5 crores were sanctioned, but the 5 crores were only disbursed over a period of time, purely depending on the progress of the project. Vaidya knew that he can sign a check of 5 crores provided he proves that he requires this money and there is a justification of getting the new money. So money was not simple. Money was available. So the concept of trying to have respect for that money, respect for procedures, respect for market, and you cannot sleep while you are putting a project, and trying to do it in time is something which is extremely important. Idea is good, but at the same time, if you cannot implement it and if you have not thought about, in fact, we used to think what could be the 10 stages of failure. It is just not that the first stage of failure, we say that, okay, we find a solution. We have to write 10 steps to failure. And that 11th step, we say that, okay, we have crossed it. We know that 10 risk factors we have already taken. So the issue is, it is just not saying that I have found a solution for the first failure step. No, it is 10 plus failures. If you can think 10 steps ahead, then I think you have a project. Otherwise, it just leaves as an idea and it dies with it.
Right. I think at this point of time, it's very crucial. Even Midun has posted this question where we are talking about coming out of the comfort zone, having those bold bets. I think I don't know if these decisions could be taken by an individual. So what's the role of having co-founders, right? Co-founders in the team, or having the first set of team members? Anand sir, you have also mentioned this long back when we were having a discussion where you were standing outside the railway station to sell the SIM card, even when you were actually having a higher position back then.
I was standing, in fact, I'll just give you a small example. I think outside the railway station, I'll tell you, this was my experience with Canara Bank. I'll tell you, this was my Canara Bank, and possibly this itself, the banks had not even understood what is a credit card. So banks wanted to bring the concept of credit card put to the market. So all I'm saying that we had this, that we were Indian Institute of Science, we were MTechs, we were blah, blah, whatever it is, the blue-eyed boys of the system. But our chairman had actually asked us, because I did not do any marketing, we were hardcore technical people. I was made to stand in front of a railway station giving the application forms for all the credit cards. Today it's something very easy. We had to stand in front of the railway stations to distribute this is where customer built up. So we had to stand in front of the stations, and then once we have distributed enough application forms, then the chairman called us. He said, you have distributed the application form, but where will the people go? So then in that case, then we were asked to go to individual shops and enroll them as the customer points, wherein people could come and then enroll themselves. So the issue is that you don't have to be a sales expert to do a sales job. You don't have to be a marketing expert to be you should capable of thinking. You put the role of an entrepreneur. I always say that when you want to coming into TC, if you ask them how does a TV work, possibly they'll say call a TV engineer. But when they buy TV at their house, do they call a TV engineer? They talk about brand, they talk about quality, they talk about various parameters. So they should shun this concept of saying that, boss, I know everything. Common sense is something which is not available easily. So I think the concept of common sense has to be built up. And if you're an entrepreneur, then you don't have excuses. Entrepreneur doesn't have excuses at all. I was heading finance in Reliance, you are aware of. And in 2000, when I was asked to start RCOM as an entrepreneur, in fact, the entrepreneur definition I understood for the first time, that you remember that we had to do a lot of government license in terms of getting approvals for setting up the fiber. We were putting the fiber, and I was a greenhorn trying to understand how the government works or how does the authorities work. So whenever I used to go to the authorities, there would be somebody to say that what is there for me in this. And I had no answer to this, so I used to come back and send a mail to my boss. We don't have mail at that. Possibly we used to send a fax to my boss saying that, sir, I'm stuck up, what do I do? And in 2 seconds, I used to get a mail back, you decide. And this happened 3 or 4 times, that whenever I used to send a mail, the fax used to get back, you decide. I was in charge of the state. I had to do all the departments. Being a finance man, I had to handle technology, I had to handle construction, I had to handle finance, I had to handle all the roles without knowing anything, just an MTech in chemical engineering. Now, only thing is that when I got fed up with this, you decide, and then I called him. I told him, Venkat, please put me to MDA. I want to talk to him. He says, I know that you will call me. So I said, yes, sir. Now, if you know, please help me. So there were 4 questions, which I think all of you also should understand. He says, Ravi, good. Where are you? I said, I'm in Bangalore. Where are you? I said, I'm in my office. He said, where am I? I said, you're in Bombay, sir. Which office? He says, Maker 4. He says, what's the distance between you and me? I said, 1200 kilometers, because I used to do a lot of flying between Bombay, Bangalore. So he says, how far is the problem from you? I said, 5 kilometers, because the problem was Vidhan Sauda. So he says, who can see the problem better? I said, I can see the problem better. He said, what are you asking me to do? That was the first time I was educated in concept of what is an entrepreneur. So entrepreneurship has to be built in everybody. He has to take the risk factor. Unfortunately, if you wear the hat of an entrepreneur, then please forget that there are support systems. You have to fail, you have to get up, you have to brush yourself, again go and fight. If you are not ready, and if you are thinking that this supporting system will help me to do all these things, then don't get into the entrepreneurship role at all. Please, this is a message to all of them.
I think that's very, very critical point.
I would say that unless you hurt your knees, hurt your hands, get some swelling in the head. No, these are all, I'm not saying you should get hit, but I'm saying that these could be the issues which you will have to face. You have to go and face an authority. You have to convince the authority. You will not have advisors, and you will not have Johnsons everywhere to come and tell you how to face this, how to face that. You have to be man enough to be in the business. If you are not man enough, please don't become an entrepreneur. I'm sorry, YP, is that correct? I think this summarizes your book also. That I have seen you to be a superhuman when you are handling your issues.
No, absolutely. In fact, I just want to add my first incident that happened when we moved to FabMart. My last corporate job was as the head of marketing in Wipro. Given the fact that a small company, was still a fairly senior position, this was in 99. I was the head of marketing for the entire hardware business. I would travel very regularly, several days a month. I had a fairly large team below me, including a secretary, and meetings would get fixed up for me. Flight tickets would be given, and I would be told, these are the meetings you'd have, and this is where you have to go, and this is the person you'd meet. And if everything is in place, I would go, take the flight ticket, car would pick me up, I would reach there, and then hotel bookings are all done. I'm just telling you, it's a very important incident. Then I moved to FabMart. And after 1 week or 10 days, we all decided that we have to go meet some music label suppliers. And they were in 2 cities in India, primarily in Bombay or in Chennai. There were only 2 parts. We had to get them. So one of my co-founders, Hari Menon, who now is the CEO of Big Basket, he said, I'll take Bombay. I said, okay. Then we said, okay, I'll go to Chennai. And then started my trouble. And this is how the support system that Ravi was mentioning. If I was in Wipro and I wanted to make music, I would call somebody and say, give me the list of all the labels, call their top person, fix up a meeting and get me a flight ticket and book a hotel. Here, I don't know who to meet, who to call. It took me a long time to get phone numbers. Those days, there were hardly any cell phones. You locate them, you call them. And then I realized nobody wanted to meet me. And I'm used to working for Wipro, where every time I would go, any meeting I would ask would get fixed. I learned my first lesson, and it's there in the book that I mentioned it. I came for the first time, I realized that in my earlier job, people were not meeting me. People were meeting my designation.
Your visiting card. Yeah.
Yeah, it was my visiting card that was opening doors, not me. And I was sitting here saying, people are meeting me. Nobody was meeting me. They were meeting the head of marketing at Wipro. So something is happening. Here I'm now calling as a co-founder of FabMart and they're saying, oh, they're not even talking to me. It's a great lesson to learn as an entrepreneur, that you have to be prepared for doing everything. You have to not only locate the person and meet him, and then you have to buy your ticket, you have to buy your block your hotel, you have to get your auto, you have to reach there. And when you reach there, you have to still pretend that everything is happening under your control. Whereas you know that when you get on, you have to get your own auto and leave. There's nobody doing anything. So it's a totally different experience. Very, very important.
Absolutely. So I think that's where the question that Swaroop has asked is relevant. Do you think it's only the passion that drives an entrepreneur to have that journey till the last mile, or is there something else, maybe meaning or whatever? So what do you think is something that keeps the entrepreneur driving to see the end?
It depends on how successful or not so successful you are. If you see success at an early stage and the company is doing very well, then the operational thing takes you along. I think the passion steps in when you're not doing so well, especially if things are not going so well, if you're beginning to fail and you're not sure what the next step is. The only thing that keeps you going is the passion. So I think passion is obviously important. I'm not saying you don't need passion to run a successful company, but as the company starts and doing very well and grows fast and there is a lot of success happening, passion becomes less important because it's more managing operational efficiency. But when the company is not doing well and you're really stuck, and somebody else asked a question about co-founders, I'm going to include that also. I think passion comes in. Also, as a co-founder, how important the role of co-founders? I think co-founders are. So first is there is no rule. I must specify this. Does it mean you always need to have a co-founder? No. Single founder companies have done well. Multiple co-founder startups have failed. So the reason for success or failure has nothing to do with the co-founder. But having a co-founder is useful, again, in similar times when things are not going so well. When things are going so well, you don't need any co-founder because everything that you do is working. It's whatever you touch is going into gold, right? You don't have a problem. But when things are not going very well, A, you need your own passion. B, you also need a co-founder with whom you can talk. Somebody to bounce off ideas saying, our products are being rejected by customers. What should I do? Our manufacturing plant is facing trouble. What should we do? Because when things are very, very heavy burden on your head, the reason a co-founder helps is you're able to bounce off ideas and get an alternative thinking. Try and get somebody who's a co-founder who has different skills. So if you're a marketing person, get somebody who's an operational expert. If you're an operational expert, get somebody who's a technology person. If you're a tech person, get somebody who's got a commercial sense. If two engineers come together, two software engineers, and form a company, you'll make a great product. But somebody has to go sell the product. So try and get a co-founder who's got different strengths. But there is no rule saying that more co-founders mean more success. It doesn't mean there's no relation there.
I think that point is also very clear, where one must also accept that I don't know everything. So I will also always get somebody who knows something that I don't know.
Johnson, it is not about a co-founder. It's also a question of an advisory team. I think, see, I have always seen that basically wherever I have worked, it is the advisory team who, like what you were saying, Vaiti was saying about finance, whether about commercial, whether it's about banking, whether it's about technology. So as long as you have a widespread broadband advisory team, I think that itself is good. Co-founder, yes, but an advisory team is equally important who have got understanding of it need not be every person should be a technology in telecom or refinery, but understands technology should be good enough. And I would say that possibly if the mindset is no for an answer, that is what an entrepreneur is. There is nothing like no for an answer. If the moment somebody started accepting no for an answer, then he's not an entrepreneur. So there has to be no for an answer. And passion is fine, but unless it's backed by preparation and performance, passion alone will not take you anywhere.
Very true, sir.
I would just say that possibly this is what my mother used to tell me, that somebody used to have a stick and move around. And he says, what are you looking for? He says, I am a Mahout by profession looking for an elephant. So the passion is that he is holding a stick. And thing is that he wants to be a Mahout, but he will not do any effort to get an elephant. Today, the same thing is happening. Everybody is moving with an idea, which is the stick. And they are looking for some Mahout who will come and say, beta, take this money and burn it and come back.
Sir, you have mentioned in your book a very specific thing about differentiating your approach. How do you build the competitive positioning? You have spoke specifically about in e-commerce itself. When everybody is focusing about speed, what experience the customer is getting, you spoke specifically about merchandising. Could you spare a little time on helping us understand how do we differentiate our solution if there are already existing solutions in the market?
Yeah, I think this is less relevant to e-commerce, but more relevant to any product or service. I'm going to talk about positioning as to how it is very important. So I go back to the example I said where you're trying to create a product or a service and you're trying to solve a problem, somebody's problem, and customers are going to pay for your solution repeatedly. Now, if you've got that in place, positioning is a very critical step. What is positioning? Positioning essentially means what is the one or two aspect, ideally one important aspect or word that comes to a customer's mind when they think of your solution. What is it that they think of? And I'll give you some very simple examples. And the rule is people attach all sorts of positioning statements. You have to be very careful. I think in most cases, it's important to have a positioning that is a direct benefit to a customer. So for example, if you're manufacturing a car, the car has many features. Consumers are looking for a car that is safe. Consumers are looking for a car that has good mileage. Consumers are looking for a car that can seat a lot of people. Consumers are looking for a car that's got a large boot space. And there could be many features like that. In an ideal world, you want to make a car that does all of these things. And then you'll say, I have a car that has a big boot space. It has the lowest running cost. It has can seat 7 people. It is the safest car. It is also the cheapest car. Unfortunately, it's not possible to make a vehicle like that. Okay, so therefore, the positioning is, if you say, I'm in this segment, somebody is already offering a car which is the safest. They're saying, my car is the safest. You can't say, I will also offer a car which is the safest. Because then the customer gets confused. There are too many safe cars around. So therefore, whichever car has come first, they will say, that's the car I want. So what you do is at that time, you say, okay, that guy is offering a car which is safe. You say, I'm going to position my car saying my car, the mileage is the best, which means the running cost is the cheapest. Then you go to the consumers and say, look, you have a safe car. You also have a car which has the lowest running cost. It doesn't mean that my car is not safe. It doesn't mean that other car doesn't have a good running cost. It's just that you want customers to identify your brand in the market as saying it's a safe car or it's low running cost. That's positioning. I'll give you another great example. FMCG products are great in terms of positioning. Maggi noodles. If you ask anybody what is the one thing that comes to a customer's mind when they took off Maggi noodles, everybody will say 2 minutes, right? Now, what is 2 minutes? 2 minutes essentially means that I can make this product quickly, speed. So the positioning in the customer's mind is fast. Now they could have gone, the 2 minutes is a very creative way of presenting speed. They could have said, Maggi noodles, fast. No, but fast doesn't make any sense. So you say 2 minutes because it takes only 2 minutes. But essentially they're saying it's convenience, it's quickness. It's anytime you want, you can make this because it's easy. Those are all things, but they pick one word. That's called positioning. The ability to bring down your product or solution into one word that a customer associates with your product is positioning. And it must be different from other solutions in the market. If everybody is offering the same thing, that's how you differentiate. So the positioning is a great differentiate thing. It's also not easy because once you make a statement, you have to stand by that every day.
Yeah.
You can't make Maggi noodles and say 2 minutes, but actually the customer takes 20 minutes to make it, because then the product will fail. Or forget 20 minutes. Even if it takes 5 minutes, customers will not buy. But the lady will say, I bought it. He said 2 minutes. It took me 3 minutes. It must then always take 2 minutes or less, which is why positioning statements have to be A, sharp, B, competitively different, and C, every time you must be able to support that statement in the consumer's mind, otherwise it will fail.
So I think you have given plenty of examples in your book as well. I've already posted the book link because I really want all my students to read it, because I had this experience. I had this experience of highs and lows when I went through your book. So, and thanks a lot for that, sir, because there's a lot of insights, those are there between those lines too. To sum it up, Satvik has asked a question about your switch from corporate job to entrepreneurship. You have mentioned in that book that one day when you were not there in Wipro consciously for a couple of days, and when you came back, nothing changed. What do you want to tell us, all of us, how to be different and not to live a life that everybody else is living? How to make our life more valued in our own eyes? So your take on that, sir. Possibly that would be a closing remark for all of us.
Sure. I think it's again a very important aspect. So let me touch. But before I answer that question, I must clarify. There is a lot of hype about entrepreneurship, and I think it is good. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, or most people want to be an entrepreneurship, which is also very good. But let me first start by saying entrepreneurs are not superior to corporate people. Let's make this very clear. There's also a feeling that if I'm an entrepreneur, then I'm this great guy. And if I'm working in a large company, then I'm a very ordinary human being. That's not true. Because the reality is, if everybody becomes an entrepreneur, then nobody will work anywhere, and then none of the companies will work, right? So being in a corporate job does not make you any less than an entrepreneur. I think it's important to understand that, right? There are different skills that are required. Some people are made to be an entrepreneur. Some people are not made to be an entrepreneur. And there's nothing better or worse about it. Okay. Now, specifically what happened in my case is that I used to work in Wipro. I'd spent 10 years in the company. And I was always thinking that maybe it's time to do something else. Maybe I should. And, most cases, you're also, because you come from a very middle-class background, your something else essentially means that you go and work in some other company. Even while I was working in Wipro, twice I had two great offers. In those days, two biggest brands. One was Microsoft and the other was Apple. Apple was only a computer company in those days. They were not making iPhones and all. There were no iPhones, right? It was just a computer company. And both the offers I got, I turned it down for different reasons, because essentially I would be joining another computer company and selling another brand of hardware or software. To me, it didn't make any difference. I was saying, okay, I'm selling Wipro, I'll sell Apple or I'll sell Microsoft. What is the big deal? Of course, the money would have been better, but the reality is that I wasn't doing anything different. And I always wanted to say, what am I doing here? I kept asking the question. So this incident that Johnson mentioned, what happens is one day I wanted to find out how important am I to this organization. So one day in the middle of the week, I didn't apply for a leave, nothing. Tuesday, Wednesday, I think those 2 days, I just stopped coming to office. I came on a Monday. Tuesday, I didn't come. Wednesday, I didn't come. And Thursday, I went to office. I never told anybody. I just told my wife I'm staying at home. She said, okay, stay at home. And in those days, there was no work from home and all that. So I just stayed at home. And Thursday, I went to office. And I went to my normal workstation. I sat down and people around me were walking around. And I spent till about lunchtime hoping that somebody will come and say, where were you last 2 days? Nobody came. I then realized that if I came to the office and sat there and worked, it didn't make any difference. If I didn't come for 2 days, it didn't make any difference. Nobody notices your presence or absence in large companies. That afternoon, I said, I'm totally wasting my time. So afternoon, I then went to 2-3 people and said, hey, what happened here? I was not here. Nobody even knew. They didn't realize I had not come. That's how important you are in large companies. So I said, forget it. Let me go do something different. And that's the day I said, whether I fail or succeed, at least let me be important enough in an organization where my presence matters. And the only thing that I can do then is being an entrepreneur. However, that's my example. Again, I'm not telling you, therefore, that if you're in a corporate and then you should become an entrepreneur. Need not be. Like I told you, different people, different strokes, different characteristics, different strengths, different skill sets. There's no single rule that fits everybody. You must do finally whatever your heart tells you. That's the most important thing.
Being you.
Yeah, be you.
Ravi sir,
Yeah.
so your final remarks.
No, I think this is the best close which is done by Vaiti. I think be you is the message one has to carry forward.
I think at this juncture where we have multiple role models in our mind and we wish to fit every role model, and having that anxiety of not even reaching closer to those role models, we have it in mind. Something that you specified, that each one of us are different and we need to be the best version of ourselves, is very, very critical at these times. And I really must thank Anand sir, and it's really a pleasure to have you talking to us, Vaiti sir. And we really look forward to sharing a lot of such insights, where some humble initiatives that we have taken, we wish to have your mentoring also in those directions.
No problem. From my side, I can tell you whenever I have time, I'll be most happy. But in this case, Ravi reached out, and I can never say no to Ravi.
Thanks, Vaiti. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. I wish both of you pleasant evening. And thanks a lot to my entire student fraternity.
And thanks to all of you who attended and listened patiently. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you so much.